Arrogant passenger bullies. Broke man on plane regrets it when pilot announces his identity. The fluorescent lights of Gate 47 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport flickered slightly as Marcus Chen stood in line, his weathered canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. His faded jeans and plain gray hoodie marked him as unremarkable among the sea of business travelers clutching leather briefcases and designer luggage. At 42 years old, Marcus had learned that true wealth whispered while poverty often shouted, but today he simply wanted to get home after 2 weeks of visiting manufacturing plants across Southeast Asia. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers, and Marcus shuffled forward with his boarding pass. He had deliberately booked seat 3A in first class, not out of extravagance, but because his 6'2" frame no longer tolerated the cramped quarters of economy after 12-hour flights. As CEO of Chen Industries, a multinational manufacturing empire worth $3.7 billion, he could have chartered a private jet. But Marcus had built his fortune on understanding efficiency, and commercial flights still made more sense for solo travel. First-class passengers, we now welcome you to board Flight 2847 to San Francisco, the gate agent announced with practiced cheerfulness. Marcus moved through the jetway, nodding politely to the flight attendants as he entered the aircraft. The first-class cabin smelled of leather and the faint citrus scent of luxury. He located his window seat and began stowing his backpack in the overhead compartment when he heard the unmistakable click of expensive heels on the aircraft floor. "Excuse me, that's my row," a sharp voice cut through the ambient noise. Marcus turned to see a woman in her mid-30s, impeccably dressed in a tailored Chanel suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. Diamond studs glinted at her ears, and her Hermes Birkin bag probably cost more than most people's cars. Her name, he would later learn, was Victoria Ashford, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions at Meridian Capital Group. "I'm in 3A, Marcus said, mildly gesturing to his seat. "You must be in 3B or 3C. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together as her eyes traveled from his scuffed sneakers up to his plain hoodie. Her lip curled slightly, an expression of distaste that she didn't bother to hide. "I'm in 3B, she said, her tone suggesting this was somehow his fault. "I specifically requested to sit next to someone appropriate for first class." Marcus blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. "I'm sorry." "Oh, don't apologize," Victoria said, though her tone suggested she very much wanted him to. "I'm sure you've worked very hard to save up for this ticket, or perhaps you used miles. Either way, first class used to mean something. Now they let just anyone up here." The casual cruelty in her words hung in the air. A flight attendant approaching with champagne flutes slowed clearly, having overheard the exchange. Marcus saw the sympathy in her eyes as she glanced at him. "Ma'am, all our passengers in first class have purchased their tickets appropriately," the flight attendant, whose name tag read Jennifer, said diplomatically. "Can I help you with your luggage?" Victoria waved her off dismissively. "I can manage." She hoisted her Birkin into the overhead compartment with more force than necessary, then settled into her seat, pointedly angling her body away from Marcus. Marcus returned to his seat by the window, a slight smile playing at his lips. He had encountered this brand of casual classism before. In his early 20s, when he had been working 16-hour days in a small machine shop building his first prototype with borrowed tools and maxed-out credit cards. Back then, such comments would have stung. Now at the helm of a company that employed over 15,000 people across 4 continents, he found them almost quaint. The boarding process continued. Marcus pulled out his worn paperback, a thriller he had been meaning to finish for weeks. He had learned long ago that expensive things often drew attention he did not want. His watch was a simple Timex, not the Patek Philippe collecting dust in his home safe. His clothes came from department stores, not exclusive boutiques. His car was a 7-year-old Honda Accord, not the Bentley his board members thought more appropriate for a CEO of his stature. Reading material from the discount bin, Victoria's voice interrupted his thoughts. She had pulled out an iPad encased in ostrich leather and was making a show of not looking at him directly. How quaint. Marcus considered responding but decided against it. Engaging with people who measured worth by price tags rarely proved productive. Instead, he simply turned the page and continued reading. The rebuff seemed to irritate Victoria further. She shifted in her seat, her movements deliberately encroaching on the armrest between them. I fly first class 3 times a month, she announced to no one in particular, though her words were clearly directed at Marcus. Usually there's a certain caliber of passenger up here. CEOs, executives, people who matter in the business world. Today seems to be an exception. Jennifer, the flight attendant, returned with a tray of pre-departure beverages. Champagne, sir, she asked Marcus warmly. Just water, please, Marcus replied. Thank you. Victoria scoffed audibly. Of course, probably can't tell the difference anyway. Jennifer's jaw tightened, but she maintained her professional composure. And for you, ma'am, champagne, the Dom Perignon, not whatever cheap alternative you're trying to pass off. Victoria took the glass without acknowledgement, her attention already back on her iPad. As the aircraft door closed and the safety demonstration began, Marcus found his mind wandering to the week ahead. His executive team had a crucial meeting scheduled for Tuesday regarding a potential acquisition in Vietnam. The due diligence reports needed his review. There were labor negotiations to monitor at the Ohio plant, and his daughter Amy's birthday was Saturday. He needed to remember to call his assistant about the gift he had ordered, a vintage microscope, for her budding interest in biology. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, and the pilot's voice came through the speakers. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Rodriguez. We're third in line for takeoff, and we should be wheels up in about 10 minutes. Flying time to San Francisco will be approximately 4 hours and 20 minutes. Weather looks good, and we're expecting a smooth flight. Flight attendants prepare for departure. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Victoria made another disapproving sound. Marcus had been trying to ignore her, but curiosity finally got the better of him. Is something wrong? He asked politely. Victoria turned to face him directly for the first time, her expression a mixture of disdain and disbelief. You really want to know? I asked, didn't I, Boisons? Fine. Victoria set down her iPad with deliberate precision. What's wrong is that I paid $5,000 for this ticket expecting a certain experience. Part of that experience is being surrounded by successful people, networking opportunities, the kind of atmosphere that befits first class. Instead, I'm sitting next to someone who looks like he just rolled out of a homeless shelter. The words were designed to wound, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone accustomed to wielding social class as a weapon. Marcus felt a flicker of anger quickly suppressed. He had not clawed his way from a one-bedroom apartment shared with 3 siblings to let someone like Victoria Ashford ruin his day. I see, Marcus said evenly. And what do successful people look like in your estimation? Victoria's smile was patronizing. Well, for starters, they don't dress like they're going to mow lawns. They carry luggage that costs more than a month's rent. They drink champagne instead of water. They read the Wall Street Journal, not airport paperbacks. Should I continue? That's an interesting perspective, Marcus replied, though I've found that truly successful people often have less need to broadcast it. Oh, please, Victoria rolled her eyes. That's what unsuccessful people say to make themselves feel better. Trust me, I work with billionaires. They appreciate quality, and they recognize it in others. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, the forces pressing them back into their seats. Marcus watched the ground fall away through the window, Chicago shrinking beneath them. The city where he had built his empire, starting with a small, contract manufacturing shop in a rundown industrial park. He remembered the early days, the rejected loan applications, the nights sleeping on the factory floor to save on rent. As they reached cruising altitude, Jennifer appeared with the first-class meal service. We have pan-seared salmon with asparagus or herb-crusted chicken with roasted vegetables, she announced. What would you prefer, sir? The salmon, please, Marcus said. It smells wonderful. Excellent choice. Jennifer's smile was genuine as she placed the meal on his tray table. Victoria waited until Jennifer had moved on before leaning over. You know they give you the same meal in economy, right? You're paying extra for absolutely nothing. Actually, Marcus said mildly, I'm paying for the extra legroom, the more comfortable seat, and the peace and quiet. Or at least I thought I was paying for peace and quiet. The implication was not subtle, but Victoria either missed it or chose to ignore it. Peace and quiet from what? Your job at Walmart. Your shift at the gas station. I work in manufacturing, Marcus said, which was technically true. Oh, a factory worker. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. That explains everything. Let me guess, you saved up for years for this ticket. This is your one big splurge, your chance to see how the other half lives. Marcus turned back to his meal without responding. The salmon was indeed excellent, prepared far better than most first-class airline food. He ate slowly, savoring each bite while Victoria continued her commentary. You know what your problem is, Victoria said, apparently determined to share her insights. People like you don't understand that success is about more than just working hard. It's about presentation connections, knowing the right people. You could work 100 years in your little factory and never achieve what I have. And what have you achieved? Marcus asked, genuine curiosity coloring his tone. Victoria straightened in her seat, pride evident in her posture. I'm senior vice president at Meridian Capital Group. I've closed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I negotiate with CEOs and board members. I have a corner office on the 42nd floor. I drive a Mercedes AMG GT. I have a penthouse in Tribeca. Shall I continue? Impressive credentials, Marcus acknowledged. You must work very hard. I do, Victoria said, apparently taking his comment at face value. 80-hour weeks are normal for me. I'm always on call, always closing deals. That's what separates people like me from people like you. I'm willing to do what it takes. And what exactly do you do at Meridian? Marcus asked. Acquisitions, you said. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, as if suspecting a trap, but her ego overrode her caution. We identify undervalued companies, acquire them, restructure them, and either integrate them into larger portfolios or sell them for profit. I personally oversee deals in the manufacturing and industrial sectors. Interesting, Marcus said. Any notable acquisitions recently? We're currently in negotiations with several targets, Victoria said, her tone becoming guarded. Of course, I can't discuss specifics, NDAs and all that, but I can say we're looking at a major manufacturing company right now. If we close this deal, it'll be the biggest of my career. Marcus nodded slowly, pieces clicking into place in his mind. Meridian Capital Group, he knew the name. They had been circling Chen Industries for 6 months, making informal inquiries through intermediaries, testing the waters for a possible acquisition. His board had unanimously voted to reject any overtures. Chen Industries was not for sale. This manufacturing company, Marcus said carefully, are they interested in being acquired? Victoria's laugh was sharp and knowing. They never are at first. That's where people like me come in. We identify the pressure points, find the leverage, make them understand why selling is in their best interest. Every company has a price and every CEO has vulnerabilities. You just have to know where to push. That sounds almost predatory, Marcus observed. That's business, Victoria countered. The weak get consumed by the strong. It's nature. These old guard CEOs, they think they can run their family businesses forever, but the market doesn't care about sentiment. If they can't maximize shareholder value, someone else will do it for them. Marcus set down his fork, his appetite suddenly diminished. And you don't think there's value in legacy, in building something that lasts? Legacy is just another word for outdated, Victoria said dismissively. The business world moves fast. Companies that don't adapt get left behind. And frankly, most of these legacy CEOs are dinosaurs. They had their time. Now it's time for real players to take over. The irony of her words was not lost on Marcus. Chen Industries had thrived precisely because he had honored the legacy of craftsmanship while embracing innovation. His factories combined cutting-edge automation with skilled human expertise. His employees had profit-sharing plans, comprehensive health coverage, and educational opportunities. Turnover was low because people wanted to work for him. But in Victoria's worldview, such considerations were probably just inefficiencies to be eliminated. You seem very confident, Marcus said. I am, Victoria replied. I'm good at what I do. Very good. In fact, I'm flying back from closing a preliminary deal right now. Small company, family-owned, thought they could hold out against us. 3 months later, they're signing the paperwork. It's all about persistence and pressure. And what happened to the family? Victoria shrugged. They got their payout, more money than they ever would have made on their own. Sure, we had to lay off about 40% of the workforce and close 2 facilities, but that's just maximizing efficiency. The owners retired rich. That's a win. Marcus thought about the families who had lost their jobs, the communities that had lost their economic anchors, the generational knowledge that had been discarded as redundant. He thought about his own employees, many of whom had been with him for over a decade, whose children attended company-sponsored summer camps, whose futures were intertwined with Chen Industries' success. "Doesn't that bother you?" he asked quietly. The human costs, Victoria's expression hardened. Business isn't charity. If those workers were valuable, they would have made themselves indispensable. The fact that they could be cut means they weren't necessary. It's harsh, but it's honest. Or maybe, Marcus said, it means that someone valued profit over people. Spoken like someone who's never had to meet a quarterly earnings target. Victoria shot back. It's easy to be idealistic when you're punching a clock and collecting a paycheck. When you're actually responsible for a company's performance, you learn to make hard decisions. Marcus smiled slightly. You might be surprised what I know about hard decisions. I doubt that, Victoria said. No offense, but you're clearly not management material. You don't have the presence, the polish, the ruthlessness it takes. You seem like a nice enough guy, probably reliable, shows up on time, does what he's told. Nothing wrong with that. The world needs factory workers. Just don't pretend you understand high-level business. Jennifer reappeared to clear their meal trays. As she reached for Marcus's, she caught his eye and gave him a look of sympathetic exasperation. He winked at her, and she had to suppress a smile. After the trays were cleared, Marcus reclined his seat slightly and pulled out his phone, switching it to airplane mode. He scrolled through his emails, reading updates from his various department heads. The Ohio negotiations were proceeding smoothly. The Vietnam deal looked promising. His CFO had questions about the quarterly projections that could wait until Monday. Victoria noticed his phone, an older iPhone model with a cracked screen protector. "You know they've released new versions, right?" she said. "That thing looks ancient." "It works fine," Marcus said simply. "That's the problem with people like you," Victoria sighed. "No ambition, satisfied with good enough instead of striving for the best. That's why you'll always be exactly where you are while people like me keep climbing." "Maybe I'm already where I want to be," Marcus suggested. "In a factory, in a middle seat of first class wearing a hoodie. That's your peak." Victoria's disbelief was palpable. "God, that's depressing." Marcus returned his attention to his phone, effectively ending the conversation. But Victoria, it seemed, was not finished. Over the next 2 hours, she continued her commentary, sometimes directly addressing him, sometimes speaking loudly, as if on phone calls, making sure everyone in the cabin could hear about her accomplishments. She talked about her expensive apartment, her luxury car, her wardrobe that cost more than most people's annual salary. She name-dropped CEOs she had met, celebrities she had encountered at exclusive events, restaurants where the waiting list was 6 months long. She painted a picture of a life lived at the pinnacle of success where money flowed freely and status was everything. Marcus listened with half an ear, occasionally responding with non-committal sounds mostly focused on his work. He noticed that other passengers were beginning to show annoyance with Victoria's volume and self-aggrandizement. The man across the aisle kept glancing over with poorly disguised irritation. A woman 2 rows ahead had put on noise-canceling headphones. About 3 hours into the flight, as they crossed over the Rocky Mountains, Victoria received a phone call. Despite the flight attendant's gentle reminder about keeping conversations quiet, she answered immediately and loudly. "Victoria Ashford," she announced. "Yes, hi Richard. No, I'm on the plane about to land in an hour. The Chicago meetings went well. I think we've got them right where we want them." She paused, listening. "Yes, the Chen Industries deal. I'm telling you, this CEO is old-fashioned, sentimental about his workers. That's his weakness. We apply pressure on the labor front, maybe leak some stories about workplace safety concerns, and he'll fold. These legacy guys always do when their precious reputations are on the line." Marcus's jaw tightened. So Meridian was planning a smear campaign. Fabricate safety concerns to damage his company's reputation and force a sale. It was underhanded but not illegal, and unfortunately not uncommon in the world of hostile acquisitions. Victoria continued her call, oblivious to Marcus's attention. "The preliminary research shows Chen keeps too much cash in reserves, doesn't maximize leverage, pays his workers way above market rate. It's inefficient as hell, which means huge profit potential once we restructure. Conservative estimate is we can increase EBITDA by 40% in the first year, just by normalizing labor costs and benefits. Normalizing, Marcus thought bitterly. Such a clinical word for destroying lives. Yeah, I know it's a tough nut to crack, Victoria went on. The board is loyal to him, and he apparently has a cult-like following among his workers. But every fortress has a weak point. We just need to find his. She laughed at something the person on the other end said. Exactly. Dinosaurs never survive extinction events. This guy is no different. He just doesn't know he's extinct yet. The call ended and Victoria tucked her phone away, looking satisfied. She glanced at Marcus and seemed to remember he was there. Sorry about that, she said, though her tone suggested she was not sorry at all. Work never stops. I'm sure you wouldn't understand, but in my world, deals don't wait for convenient timing. I understand more than you think, Marcus said quietly. Sure you do, Victoria said patronizingly. She checked her watch, a Cartier that glittered even in the cabin's subdued lighting. Almost there. Can't wait to get off this plane and away from the mediocrity. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Folks, this is Captain Rodriguez again. We're beginning our initial descent into San Francisco. We should have you on the ground in about 30 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. As the aircraft began its descent, Victoria pulled out a compact mirror and began touching up her makeup, apparently preparing for whatever awaited her in San Francisco. Marcus looked out the window at the bay coming into view, the late afternoon sun turning the water golden. The landing was smooth, and as the aircraft taxied to the gate, passengers began gathering their belongings. Victoria was up immediately, pulling her Birkin from the overhead compartment with practiced efficiency. She did not say goodbye to Marcus or acknowledge his existence as she prepared to disembark. Then Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the speakers again, but this time there was something different in his tone. Less formal, more personal. Ladies and gentlemen, before we reach the gate, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge a very special passenger we have on board today. Those of you who follow the business world might recognize the name Marcus Chen. Victoria froze her hand, still on her bag. Mr. Chen is the founder and CEO of Chen Industries, one of the most successful and ethically run manufacturing companies in the world. Captain Rodriguez continued. His company employs over 15,000 people and is known for its revolutionary approach to worker welfare and environmental sustainability. Mr. Chen, I want to thank you personally. My brother works at your Ohio facility, and he's told me how your company changed his life. So on behalf of everyone who benefits from your leadership, thank you for flying with us today. The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause. Passengers turned to look toward the first-class cabin, trying to spot Marcus. Several business travelers pulled out their phones, no doubt looking up Chen Industries. Victoria's face had gone pale, then red, cycling through shades of mortification. She turned slowly to look at Marcus, who met her gaze calmly. You, she whispered. You're Marcus Chen. I am, Marcus confirmed. But you were dressed like... You said you worked in manufacturing. I do work in manufacturing, Marcus said pleasantly. I just didn't mention that I own the company. You seemed so certain about who I was and what I represented, I didn't want to interrupt your narrative. Victoria's mouth opened and closed silently. The full weight of her comments over the past 4 hours crashed down on her. Every insult, every dismissive remark, every assumption she had made was now revealed for the ugly prejudice it was. Oh my God, she breathed, and the deal. You're the CEO we're trying to acquire. Yes, Marcus said, I am. And I have to say, Ms. Ashford, your approach to business is exactly why Chen Industries will never be for sale to Meridian Capital Group. You see companies as assets to be stripped, employees as expenses to be minimized, and legacy as something to be discarded. That's not business. That's predation. Other passengers were beginning to file past them, several pausing to shake Marcus's hand or offer words of thanks. He greeted each one warmly, briefly, delaying his departure to acknowledge their kindness. Victoria stood frozen, her world crumbling around her. Mr. Chen, I didn't know. I mean, if I had known who you were, then you would have treated me differently, Marcus finished. Yes, I understand. That's precisely the problem, Ms. Ashford. You judge people's worth by their appearance, their clothing, their superficial markers of status. You never stop to consider that true success might look different than you imagine, or that dignity and respect should be offered to everyone, not just people you deem important enough. I made a mistake, Victoria said, desperation creeping into her voice. But surely you can understand from a business perspective that Meridian's offer could be beneficial for your shareholders for your company's growth potential. My company's growth potential, Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm but now edged with steel, is not your concern. And after overhearing your phone call about fabricating safety concerns and applying pressure through smear campaigns, I'll be forwarding a recording of that conversation to my legal team. I believe there are regulations about attempted corporate manipulation through false statements. Victoria's face went from red to white. You recorded my call. I didn't need to, Marcus said. The flight security cameras have audio recording. I'm sure the airline will cooperate with a formal investigation if it comes to that. He paused, letting that sink in. But honestly, Ms. Ashford, what concerns me more than your questionable tactics is your complete lack of respect for the human beings your decisions affect. Those 40% of workers you mentioned cutting so casually, those are people with families, mortgages, dreams. The facilities you talked about closing, those are communities' economic lifelines. That's just business, Victoria said weakly, retreating to her earlier defense. No, Marcus corrected her firmly. That's just greed. Business can be profitable and ethical. It can create value for shareholders while also creating value for workers and communities. I've built a $3.7 billion company proving exactly that. Chen Industries has higher profit margins than most of our competitors precisely because we invest in our people. Low turnover, high expertise innovation from engaged employees who feel ownership in our success. Jennifer appeared at Marcus's elbow. Mr. Chen, the captain, would like to meet you if you have a moment. Of course, Marcus said warmly. He gathered his backpack and stepped into the aisle, finally looking back at Victoria. Ms. Ashford, I hope you'll take something away from today beyond embarrassment. Success isn't about what you wear or what you own or who you can look down upon. It's about what you build, who you lift up along the way, and whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and respect what you see. I wish you well, but I hope you'll reconsider your approach to business and to people. With that, Marcus made his way toward the cockpit, leaving Victoria standing alone in the first-class cabin, her expensive suit and jewelry suddenly feeling like a costume rather than armor. Captain Rodriguez greeted Marcus enthusiastically, shaking his hand with both of his own. Mr. Chen, it's an honor, truly. My brother Marco has worked in your quality control department for 8 years now. He tells me you learned everyone's name within the first month of the plant opening. Marco Rodriguez, Marcus said immediately, smiling. Great guy. His daughter just started college on our scholarship program, right engineering at Purdue. Captain Rodriguez's eyes widened. You remember that? I try to remember the important things, Marcus said simply. They talked for a few more minutes with Marcus genuinely interested in Marco's well-being and career progression. Other crew members gathered around and Marcus found himself answering questions about the company and offering encouragement to a young flight attendant whose husband had just applied for a position at the Ohio facility. When Marcus finally exited the aircraft, Victoria was nowhere to be seen. She had apparently rushed off the plane as quickly as possible, eager to escape the scene of her humiliation. Jennifer walked Marcus up the jetway, apologizing profusely for Victoria's behavior. Please don't, Marcus said kindly. You handled it professionally, which is all anyone could ask. And honestly, it was a good reminder for me. A reminder of what? Jennifer asked. That I need to be more visible, Marcus said thoughtfully. I prefer to stay out of the spotlight to let the work speak for itself. But if a senior executive at a major capital firm doesn't even recognize me, maybe I have been too private. Maybe it's time to be more public about what ethical business can look like. Jennifer smiled. I think that would be wonderful. The world could use more examples of success that don't require stepping on people to achieve it. Marcus's driver was waiting for him at the curb holding a sign with his name, despite knowing exactly what he looked like. Marcus had long ago accepted that Charles took a certain pride in the formality of onward. The drive to his modest home in the suburbs took 40 minutes through rush hour traffic. That evening, as Marcus sat in his home office reviewing documents for Monday's meetings, his phone rang. It was David Summers, his chief legal officer. Marcus, I just got a very interesting call, David said, his tone amused. Meridian Capital Group's general counsel reached out. Apparently, one of their VPs had a problematic encounter with you today. News travels fast, Marcus observed. According to their counsel, this VP, Victoria Ashford, has been placed on immediate leave pending an internal review. They're very apologetic and want to assure you that her comments and proposed tactics do not represent Meridian's corporate values. Translation, they're afraid of a lawsuit, Marcus said. Correct, David confirmed. They're also backing away from any acquisition interest in Chen Industries. Apparently, Ms. Ashford's phone call on the plane was overheard by several passengers, one of whom happens to be a business journalist. The story is already circulating on social media. Meridian is trying to do damage control. Marcus leaned back in his chair, conflicted. Part of him felt Victoria had received appropriate consequences for her behavior. But another part, the part that had built his business on second chances and believing in people's capacity for growth, wondered if there was something more constructive to be done. David, reach out to Meridian's counsel, Marcus said finally. Tell them we have no intention of pursuing legal action, but we would like Ms. Ashford to participate in a program we're developing. A program, David asked cautiously. Something I've been thinking about for a while, Marcus explained. A workshop series for business executives on ethical leadership, stakeholder capitalism, and the long-term value of investing in people. If Ms. Ashford completes the program and demonstrates genuine understanding of its principles, we'll consider the matter closed. That's remarkably generous given her behavior, David noted. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But I remember being young and ambitious and making mistakes. I had mentors who corrected me without destroying me. Maybe Ms. Ashford just needs someone to show her there's a better way. 3 weeks later, Marcus received an email. It was from Victoria Ashford. Mr. Chen, it began, I have completed the first module of your leadership program, and I wanted to reach out personally to apologize again for my behavior on the flight. Participating in this program has been humbling and eye-opening. I always thought I understood business, but I'm realizing I only understood one narrow, ultimately destructive version of it. I've been visiting some of the companies Meridian acquired during my tenure, seeing firsthand the communities impacted by our restructuring decisions. Meeting the people behind the numbers has been uncomfortable but necessary. I'm beginning to understand what you meant about the human cost of business decisions. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not sure I deserve the opportunity you've given me, but I want you to know that I'm committed to doing better. Whether I continue at Meridian or find a different path, I will carry the lessons from this experience forward. Thank you for responding to my cruelty with education rather than revenge. It's a leadership model I hope to emulate. Respectfully, Victoria Ashford. Marcus read the email twice, then forwarded it to David with a note. Sometimes people surprise you. Let's continue supporting her growth. 6 months after the flight, Marcus was invited to speak at a business leadership conference in New York. As he stood backstage waiting to go on reviewing his notes one final time, someone approached him. Mr. Chen. He looked up to see Victoria Ashford dressed more modestly than their first encounter, her expression tentative but sincere. Ms. Ashford, Marcus said, surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm one of the conference organizers, she explained. I left Meridian 3 months ago. I'm working with a nonprofit now, teaching ethical business practices to MBA students. The pay is terrible compared to what I used to make, but the work feels meaningful. That's quite a career change, Marcus observed. That flight changed my life, Victoria said simply. I was so focused on wealth and status that I lost sight of why business exists in the first place. To create value, solve problems, make people's lives better. I'm trying to help the next generation understand that before they make the mistakes I did. Marcus smiled. That's good work, important work. Mr. Chen, I wanted to thank you, Victoria continued. You could have destroyed my career that day. Instead, you gave me a chance to become someone better. I'm grateful. We all need second chances sometimes, Marcus said. The question is what we do with them. They talked for a few more minutes before Marcus was called to the stage. His speech about building successful companies through ethical leadership and investment in people was well received. But the moment that stuck with him was seeing Victoria in the audience taking notes furiously, no longer the arrogant executive who had dismissed him on a plane, but a student eager to learn a better way. As Marcus flew home that evening, sitting once again in first class in his comfortable jeans and hoodie, He reflected on the strange journey that had begun on Flight 2847. Victoria's transformation reminded him why he had built Chen Industries the way he had. Yes, profit mattered. Growth mattered. But people mattered most of all. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter, Amy. "How was the speech, Dad?" "Good," he texted back. "Remind me to tell you a story about a plane ride when I get home." "Mysterious," she replied. "Can't wait." Marcus smiled and looked out the window at the clouds below, golden in the setting sun. Success, he had learned long ago, was not about the clothes you wore or the things you owned. It was about the lives you touched, the opportunities you created, the legacy you built. And sometimes it was about teaching someone who thought they knew everything that they still had much to learn. The plane carried him home through the darkening sky, and Marcus Chen, billionaire CEO, in a hoodie and jeans, closed his eyes and rested satisfied with the day's work.